Now on to problem 8-81. In parts A through D below, look for patterns as you calculate the sum and the product for each pair of complex numbers. Use what you find to answer parts E through G. So we're going to kind of experiment. We're going to do A, B, C, and D, and then we're going to use what we find in these to help us answer E, F, and G. What you see on the left, these are like complex roots. Okay, you'll notice that they all kind of look the same, except the only difference is we have the plus versus the minus in the middle. Okay, so complex roots kind of look like this. Now, all they're asking us to do is to take these and find the sum and the product of these expressions. So I'll do the first one with you, and then hopefully you can just pause the video, try to work through them, and then go back and check your answers. Let's start with A. So letter A, I have 2 plus I plus a 2 minus I. So when I add those together, right, I'm looking at the fact that my positive I and my negative I will cancel out, and I know that 2 plus 2 is 4. So my sum right here for that first one is 4. Okay, so when we take the product of the roots, we have 2 plus I times a 2 minus I. So when we multiply these out, we're going to have to FOIL it. So 2 times 2 gives us 4. 2 times a negative I would give us a negative 2I. I times 2 would give us positive 2I. And then I times negative I would give us a negative I squared. Again, negative 2I and positive 2I. We have those opposites, so they'll cancel out. And now we've got 4 minus, and remember, I squared is the same thing as negative 1. So we're going to say 4 minus a negative 1, which is going to end up giving us 5. So our sum was 4 and our product was 5. Hopefully you kind of understand what it's asking you to do now, and you should pause the video and try to work through these. I'll go back through them real quick just to make sure that everybody's good with the process in case you made a mistake. All right, so letter B, I'm going to do 3 minus 5I plus 3 plus 5I. And when we do that, we should end up with 6. For the product, we've got 3 minus 5I times 3 plus 5I. So when we FOIL that out there, we should have a 9 plus 15I minus a 15I minus 25I squared. Well, again, positive 15I and negative 15I cancel out. So we have 9 minus 25. And then when I do I squared, it'd be a negative 1. So when we do that, it's going to be like 9 plus 25, which should give us 34. For letter C, okay, I have negative 4 plus I plus a negative 4 minus that I. And we should end up with negative 8. When I do negative 4, whoops, added an extra parenthesis in there, negative 4 plus I times negative 4 minus I, when you FOIL this out, you should end up with, let's see, 16 plus 4I minus 4I minus I squared. So it's like 16 minus negative 1, which would give us 17. Letter D, 1 plus I radical 3 times 1 minus I radical 3. Actually, I'm sorry, we're going to add them first. So when we add those together, obviously these two are going to end up canceling out. So when I do 1 plus 1, we should get 2. When we FOIL them out, we have 1 plus our I radical 3 and 1 minus I radical 3. I'll go ahead and FOIL it out with you just because we haven't done a lot with radicals. So 1 times 1 gives us 1. 1 times a negative I radical 3 gives us a negative I radical 3. Positive I radical 3 times 1 would give us a positive 1. So those are going to cancel again. Even with the radicals, those cancel. And then we're going to have positive I radical 3 times negative I radical 3. So we know it's going to be a negative. And we're going to say I radical 3 squared, right? Because we're multiplying it times itself. And when we do that, we should have 1. Our two middle terms are still canceling out. And then we got to think about what we have here. So we're going to say minus. Now, when I take my I and my I squared, I'm going to have an I squared. And then I'm going to have a radical 3 squared. Well, radical 3 squared is radical 9. And if we take this and we simplify this, this is like saying 1 minus I squared is negative 1. And the square root of 9 is 3. So we've got 1 minus a negative 3, or 1 plus 3, which should give us 4. Okay, so hopefully you have all those values correct. I'd make sure you mark them so you can go back. You might need to use them later. Let's look at E now. What complex number can you multiply 3 plus 2i by to get a real number? So hopefully you picked up on this, right? We multiplied this complex number times this complex number and got a real number. This complex number times this complex number gave us a real number. And I imagine you're picking up on that pattern already, right? So what number would I have to multiply it by? You should have said 3 minus 2i. Now what happens if we multiply two complex numbers that look like this? Right, let's go ahead and do it. If I do negative 4 times negative 4, I get 16. If I do negative 4 times 3i, I get negative 12i. If I do positive 5i times negative 4, we get negative 20i. And then 5i times 3i would be plus 15i squared. So if we simplify that down, that should give us, let's see, I think this would become a minus 15, right? So 16 minus 15 would be 1. And then when I combine my like terms here, I'm going to have minus 32i. So we get 1 minus 32i. So these ones aren't really following the pattern that we have above. Therefore, our product is still complex. Right? It's still a complex number. Now, G says, what complex number can you multiply a plus bi by to get a real number? So this is the general form. We should be able to multiply this by a minus bi. Okay, and what we call that, and you may have heard of this before, but we call that the conjugate. Okay, it's the conjugate. So we'd say a minus bi is the conjugate of a plus bi. Okay, so when we take something and we multiply those together, when we put those together, it makes them a difference of squares. So if I had a plus bi times a minus bi is a difference of squares. Right, so think about that's like when we had our a plus b times a minus b, right? That's when we had our difference of squares earlier. That equaled a squared minus b squared. But we'll talk about that here in a little bit. So this is the end of problem 8-81. Please make sure your information is accurate.